Good morning. I'm Riley Graham.
And I'm Brooklyn Webb.
Welcome to the E2 News. This is the news for the week of Monday, May 18th to Friday, May 22nd.
Here is this week's lunch menu.
Monday, mini corn puppies choice chicken fajita.
Tuesday, alphabet soup choice sloppy joe.
Wednesday, hamburger steak choice chicken rings.
Thursday, spaghetti choice corn dog.
Friday, shrimp poppers choice turkey ranch wrap.
The Explorer bookstore will be open this Wednesday during lunch.
Remember, every book costs just $1.50 each.
The last school skating party of the year will be this Thursday at Anderson Roll Arena from 6 to 8.
Remember to have an adult come in to sign you in and pick you up no later than 8 o'clock.
This Friday is Dress Like a Nerd Day. Think geek and wear your nerdiest clothing for a $1 donation for students and $2 for adults.
All proceeds will go to buying more items for the fish cart.
It's time to hear the word of the week.
This week's word is absurd.
Absurd means ludicrous or ridiculous.
For example, this week's school year has gone so fast. It's absurd that it is almost over.
Remember to try to use this word of the week when you are talking or writing this week.
Mrs. Strebe wanted to remind all the 4th and 5th graders that the program has been moved to May 28th. Make sure to put that on the calendar.
And now it's time for the
shout out of the week.
Mrs. Turner would like to give a shout out to 3rd grader De'Eric Kelly for helping every day by putting the orange cone away after arrival. Thank you, De'Eric. You're awesome.
Mrs. Worley would like to give a shout out to Mrs. Martin and Mrs. Manglow's class who spelled out perfect attendance and earned a class popcorn party. Way to go, kids.
And now it's time for Mrs. Womack to do the fish cast drawing for books.
Good morning, Eastside Explorers, and once again, it's time for a fish cast drawing for books. Remember, if your name gets called, come on down to the office and get a certificate that you can use for a free book on Wednesday. From Mrs. Skelding's class, our first grader, David Juarez. From Mrs. Skelding's class again, David's friend, Devin Cruz. Come on down. From Mrs. Shuck's class, Hayden Trent. And our last first grader for this week is from Mrs. Smith's class, and it's Layla Thomas. Come on down and get a certificate. 2nd grade from Mrs. Hines' class, Olivia Dreschler. Mrs. Hines' class again, Sierra Lawson. Mrs. Bennett's class, Ian Willoughby. And our last winner from Mrs. Poor's class is Isabella Johnson. Come on down and get a certificate. From 3rd grade, Mrs. Short's class, Haley Wong. From Mrs. Stanley's class, Stephen Klein. From Mrs. Sanders' class, Jacob McBride. And our last 3rd grader for this week is from Mrs. Stanley's class again, Charisma Welker. Come on down and get a certificate. From 4th grade, Mrs. Payton's class, Sebastian Scott. Mrs. Biggis's class, Kenneth Washington. Mrs. Payton's class, Michael Phipps. And our last 4th grader for this week, from Mrs. Reisinger's class, Michael Robinson. Come on down and get a certificate. From 5th grade, Mrs. Lavelle's class, Adam Stanley. Miss Plummer's class, Savannah Hess. From Miss Plummer's class again, Enrique Ramirez. And our last 5th grader for this week is from Mrs. Lavelle's class, and it is Autumn Smith. Come on down and get a certificate. Once again, Eastside Explorers, thanks for being proud, positive, and productive.